Really think that went on yesterday in week 13 of the college football season. So a lot of weird and interesting things happened yesterday. Notre Dame destroyed Army 49-14, which I fully expected them to do. Notre Dame's game next week against Southern Cal becomes even bigger than it already is, with it being a rivalry. Because now that Notre Dame is 10-1, if they win that game, they for sure earn themselves a spot in the college football playoff. But if they lose that game, they might or might not make the college football playoff. Because at 10-2, even though some two-loss teams lost yesterday, because Notre Dame is too scared to join a conference, and their schedule has been so weak this season, and they have the worst loss of the season to Northern Illinois. And if they do lose to Southern Cal, even though Southern Cal's better than Northern Illinois, that still wouldn't be a very good loss because Southern Cal has lost 5 games. So that's why I think they would be in pretty big danger of getting left out. But Southern Cal got bowl eligible yesterday with the win over UCLA 19-13 that I watched part of. But it's been a really disappointing season for them because their roster was way more talented than you would think it is, seeing their record. And they made a quarterback change in the Nebraska game and stuck with it through this game against UCLA. And I know they won the game, and it is a big rivalry game for them. But if you compare rosters between USC and UCLA, Southern Cal is a whole lot more than 6 points better than them, and their offense was not very good at all yesterday. This quarterback that they replaced Miller Moss with is not very good from what I've seen of him. And if you've watched some Southern Cal football like I have this season, then you probably know that the quarterback wasn't the issue for them. Miller Moss, of course, isn't as good as Caleb Williams. So Southern Cal's offense wasn't as good with him this season as it was last season uh, with Caleb Williams. But it's not his fault because their offensive line is still terrible. And Miller Moss is a good enough quarterback that if he had an average offensive line, even Southern Cal would have a really good offense. Caleb Williams was just so good that he was able to kind of cover up some of those offensive line struggles. And I think Moss will enter the portal after this season is over. And I know some teams that would be glad to have him. And Ole Miss found a way to blow their trip to the college football playoff, losing to Sunbelt Napier 24-17. And I know I said last week about how bad it was for LSU to lose to Sunbelt Napier, and I'm not changing my mind just because Ole Miss, which is my team, lost to them. This was a terrible loss. Ole Miss's offense played so crappy. They're so much more talented than Florida. And Ole Miss, I now think, is just never going to get it done because this was their most talented roster they've ever had, and they're still going to miss out on the 12-team playoff, which they would have gotten in last season with a much less talented roster. And this team is a better team than last year's Ole Miss team, even though they're going to end up with a worse record. So Ole Miss last season, uh, lost to the two teams that you would have fully expected them to lose to, Alabama and Georgia, because they didn't have the talent along the line of scrimmage to have much of a chance to beat either one of those teams. But this year they did, and they were able to beat Georgia. But this team is so inconsistent and has lost to teams that they shouldn't have lost to. And last year's Ole Miss team was actually pretty consistent. They never lost to a team that they shouldn't have, and they never even lost a 50-50 game. And Ole Miss has struggled a lot with inconsistency for a long time, and that has come back this season after it had gone away last season. Now Ole Miss will still win the Egg Bowl, but 9-3 gives them zero chance, I think, to get a playoff spot. Ole Miss went for it twice in the red zone, which was a stupid mistake. This time, J.J. McGee's got stopped on fourth down several times, and then they missed a short field goal. And then Ole Miss's defense for sure did not have their best day yesterday, but they played well enough that Ole Miss that should have been able to win the game. It wasn't really their defense's fault because Florida's field goal drive actually just happened because Ole Miss fumbled on a punt return, and Florida got the ball in field goal range and couldn't get a first down. So they really held Florida to just 21 points offensively. But Ole Miss's offense has been such a disappointment this season, except for the Arkansas game and I guess the Georgia game, because Georgia does have a really good defense. But Georgia now is going to go to the SEC championship game, and Auburn upset Texas A&M 43-41 after four overtimes. Texas A&M's conference championship and college football playoff hopes are over now that they have three overall losses and two conference losses because even if Texas A&M beats Texas next week, Tennessee is almost sure to beat Vanderbilt, and that'll put them at 10-2. And even though Texas A&M would move ahead of Texas because they would have the same conference record, uh, A&M would not pass at Tennessee because Tennessee would be ranked higher, most likely having a better overall record than Texas A&M. But if Texas beats Texas A&M, it's going to be a rematch between Georgia and Texas in the SEC championship. And Alabama's playoff hopes came to an end yesterday. Too. They played probably the worst I've ever seen them play, and I've been watching football for a really long time. I've told you before. They got blown out 24-3 by Oklahoma. I had never seen Alabama score only 3 points offensively in a game. Jalen Milroe played the worst he's played in his whole college career yesterday. Oklahoma shut down his runs, and Oklahoma has, been really bad this season. They did just become bowl eligible after the win yesterday. But actually, if you compare talent between Oklahoma and Alabama, Alabama, of course, is more talented, but it's not so much of a difference that it would be crazy for Oklahoma to win the game. It's just surprising because of how much Oklahoma has struggled this season and how many injuries they have. Oklahoma's offensive line actually won the battle with Alabama's defensive line, and Oklahoma's offensive line had been terrible before yesterday this season. Oklahoma rushed for 260 yards yesterday, and Jackson Arnold had 131 rushing yards himself, and a fourth string running back, Robinson, had 107 rushing yards and two touchdowns yesterday. And Oklahoma has proven now that it's not that they're just not ready to play in the SEC. They could have had a really good team this year if it wouldn't have been for all of the injuries at wide receiver and on the offensive line. And Oklahoma didn't even throw the football much yesterday. They only threw it 11 times and only had 68 yards passing. So their quarterback, except for his running, still didn't play very well yesterday. But Oklahoma is in the future going to be able to compete for SEC championships, I think. And I now do think that Brent Venables does need another season because he has now turned around Oklahoma's defense to being really good. And I think if the offense it can improve next season, they can compete for an SEC championship. But Kalen DeBoer is just not near as good of a coach as Nick Saban is. And I know you probably already knew that. And Ohio State destroyed Indiana yesterday, 38 to 15. And Indiana, it turns out, is about what I thought they were. They're a good team, of course, having won 10 games, but they're not an elite team. And the more talented team, Ohio State, outplayed them. Ohio State now just has to beat Michigan next week to go to the Big Ten championship, and I know they haven't done that in a while, but they could be able to beat Michigan now. And something else I'd like to mention is Oklahoma linebacker Danny Stutzman now has three 100 plus tackle seasons, and he's no doubt going to have a long uh, career in the NFL. He's an amazing player, probably the best at linebacker in the SEC this season. And my favorite coach, Coach Prime, season fell apart yesterday. And I'm just joking. He's not my favorite coach. How could he be my favorite coach when he's not even a real football coach? He just had two really good first round players that were so good that they were able to pretty much by themselves get Colorado a bunch of wins against teams that were even more terrible than they are. And now Colorado's a conference championship and playoff hopes are over, and they won't even be able to say what Ole Miss can say. You know, Ole Miss at least got a really good win. Colorado, I don't even know what their best win was this season. I just have to look through their schedule and see which team that they beat stinks the least of all of them. But Colorado's defense was supposedly a lot better this season, but their run defense sure did not look any better yesterday. They gave up 333 rushing yards to Kansas and lost at 37 to 21 to a team that will have to win next week to even become bowl eligible. They gave up 207 yards to one running back for Kansas. And next week's game against Oklahoma State will probably be Coach Prime's final game as Colorado's head coach because I think that his two sons, Shiloh Sanders and Shador Sanders, and Travis Hunter will probably skip the bowl game and he'll leave with them because he won't have any interest in being there anymore. But that will be it with this video. Please subscribe and thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.